Okay, think we're live. Think we're alive now. There does seem to be somebody around. Let me do the pop-out chat. Say hi, Luke and Megaleech. Just get all my little windows arranged and get it all happening. And hello, Charlie. Mouse is being difficult. There we go. And hello, Miss Fox Vacation. Okay, let's got that, and we're rocking and rolling. Hello, Mystery 09 and Justin. Nice to see you. My little tropical fruit juice happening here. Hey, with some lemonade, want to mix it up rather than just juice. So I had to put some lemonade in it. Oh yeah, that's nice and tropical. I'm liking that. Luke, 3 students. Well, the Sunday was an extra one because Monday was a public holiday, so I thought, why not? Hell, you almost got another one yesterday. Aidsy was around yesterday. We were working on some stuff. Wasn't quite up to a live stream though. Justin, you were in a 5-car collision. Holy crap, I'm glad you're okay. That's pretty intense news. Collisions are not good. I don't think I've ever been in a 5-car collision. I don't think I've been in more than a 2-car collision, and only quite minor ones at that. Yeah, cars, they're dangerous, aren't they? I do always laugh, like when people talk about self-driving cars and they're worried about the safety. Ooh, who will the computer decide to kill? It's just like, they're never going to kill as many people as human drivers do. Hey, Catherine, how are you? Yeah, like, because there's, I think we're now up to, I think, 1 verified fatality, maybe 2. I'm trying to remember, but I think it's like 1 verified fatality caused by a self-driving car. And what we found out in the inquiry into that, the maker of the self-driving, that was an Uber self-driving car, if I remember rightly, and they had switched off the feature that would have picked out the pedestrian they hit because it was getting too many false positives, and they dumped it all on the driver. There was a person sitting in the driver's seat. They were supposed to take over if something went wrong. But yeah, the fatality only happened because they'd switched off some of the safety features. Yeah, so it's not so much that a self-driving car isn't safe, as much as you probably should leave all the safety features turned on. Because apparently this thing that was meant to detect pedestrians was detecting things like street signs and trees and shrubs by the side of the road as pedestrians, and it was braking, getting false positives. So they switched it off, which turned out to be a bad idea. So I said, Justin, your car, you were rammed by 2 cars behind you, propelled into the car in front of you. Yeah, that tends to happen with the concertina rear-ending, smacking into one. I think the one who takes the most blame in a multi-car rear-ender is the person who's at the back. Doesn't mean they will cop all the blame, but I think they cop the most culpability, like the last one to hit from the back. It can vary accident to accident, of course, but I think by default, the one at the back is regarded as being the most at fault. Ms. Foxication, the Tesla self-driving car hit the robot in the Las Vegas convention. I never fully believed that story. I thought that story was somewhat contrived and done to get media coverage of the event that was happening. I was very suspicious of that story. Big boy, ahoy, ahoy to you too. Yeah, Justin, that sounds right. The fifth car cops the blame. Even though it sounds like the fourth car hit you before the fifth car did. Oh, look, you're worried about the smart cars being so small. What I've read of smart cars, like you don't want to get run over by a really large vehicle. But from what I've read, the safety standards in a smart car is quite high. It's just different to bigger cars. The smart car doesn't have as big a crumple zone as a bigger car because there's not as much of it. But there's a like shell around the driver and passenger, and I've heard that you like will bounce around like a little pinball if you get in a serious crash in one of those. I wouldn't like to be in a serious crash in a smart car. In mild to medium crashes, I don't think you're any worse off in them than in another car. But I don't fancy your chances in a serious crash. I think a larger vehicle with better safety is going to win that. Ooh, Megalich, have a thought experiment. If it's motorcycles that were new tech, not driverless cars, do you think the new invention of the motorcycle would be approved for road use? That is a very difficult thing to answer because of course, my impulse is, but motorcycles are as old as cars. Putting an engine on a bicycle, because a bicycle is one of the most amazing machines humans ever invented. And yeah, once they had internal combustion engines or even electric motors, there's always someone who had the idea of putting that on a bicycle. You could see people arguing if motorcycles didn't exist at all and someone tried to introduce them today, you could see a lot of people saying a motorcycle is simply too unsafe, you can't allow it on the road. I think there'd be certainly people saying that. Whether they'd win the argument, I don't know. But there'd definitely be people saying that. There's misclassification. You saw a video of a small car versus an F-150. Oh yeah, small car gets mashed. F-150 bounced, yeah. Yeah, but you get an accident with an F-150 versus a tree or an F-150 versus an F-150, they get fucked up. Because if they hit, like a small car, just because of mass, they knock them for six and crush them. But if an F-150 hits something where the F-150's mass doesn't help it, they're not very safe vehicles. That'd be all kinds of fucked up. It's kind of like all the four-wheel drives that people have the illusion that they're safe in. They feel safer. The four-wheel drives, particularly the bigger ones, give the illusion of being safe, but they're really not. You're far more likely to have a single vehicle accident, as in lose control, in an SUV than almost any other vehicle. And like I said, if it's not with a small car, if it's with another large vehicle or a tree or a wall or going down an embankment, the likelihood of you being seriously injured or killed in an SUV is much higher than in a small to medium car. Big Pat, how are you, buddy? Yeah, exactly, Luke. Some of those vehicles, you just have to turn fast and they'll roll. And Ms. Foxakin, that whole thing with them being higher and it feels like you've got an advantage over smaller vehicles, that introduces a whole bunch of risks that smaller cars don't have. Like, yes, arguably, if they hit a smaller car is likely to come off second best. But anything apart from that, and the people in the SUV are at much higher risk. And hey, Chronic, how's it going? Oh, Catherine, I heard they had Lime scooters in Adelaide on trial for Fringe. Yeah. People throwing them into the torrents. That always happens. Those, I think they're finally gone now, the stupid hire bikes from here. So many people just hate them and were throwing them into the Yarra or throwing them up in trees or hanging them off street signs or something. Damn. Glad you're okay, Justin. Oh, but you had your cars getting written off when it was relatively low mileage. Yeah, well, as long as someone else pays for it, maybe that's okay. Yeah, look, maybe those Lime scooters are going to get wider distribution, but although I don't know, all those urban hire things have problems, basically. Oh, Big Pat, you got back with Rachel. Well, that's nice. You play the field for a little while and she wants you back. I know you sly dog. You're a sly dog, Pat. That's all I'm going to say. You're a sly dog. I don't know why I'm channeling a pirate there, but I suddenly felt like I was channeling a pirate. Arr, you're a sly, scurvy sea dog, you are. So, Luke, you are seeing the scooters around a lot in Adelaide. Okay, well, yeah, you know, I don't know. They introduce a different sort of risk. I mean, hey, a city centre with no cars and just scooters and bikes, that'd be great. But yeah, the scooters with cars, yeah, a little bit dodgy. I don't know. You like cable cars, Miss Foxification? Do you mean by cable cars? Do you mean like suspended overhead ones? Because in San Francisco, they just call trams cable cars, but in other cities, I see when people refer to cable cars, they mean overhead ones on wires. Of course, I'm a big fan of our tram network in Melbourne, but people who are really into cars bag trams all the time. Oh, they take up too much room. Blah, blah, blah. Fuck off. We'd be much better without cars and with more trams. So Chronic, this guy running for president. Oh yeah, that Yang guy running for president. I don't know. I'd heard Yang was popular with, like, he's a bit of a dark horse at the moment. I heard he was popular with like the bros on Reddit. He's a Democratic potential presidential candidate. Yeah, I heard he was popular with the bros on Reddit, but yes. Ha! See, I love that. After World War II, the Australian Army sold tanks to farmers. Why, second-hand tank? It's cheaper than a tractor. I don't think that really caught on. I grew up in the country, and I don't remember any tractors on farms. Facts out feels, yes. Driving in Melbourne is a bit of an adventure sometimes. The hook turns, which are there for the benefit of trams, confuse the fuck out of people. Oh my God, like, and even just normal intersection sometimes. Hook turn will make it worse, but it's a little while since I've seen a really spectacular one, but occasionally hook turns will make a tourist panic and they'll freeze up and they'll end up stopped in the middle of like a four-way intersection and they're just blocking everyone and they're just fucking freaking out. And you just look at them and go, dude, just go. You're blocking all the traffic. There's no one in your way. But you can tell everything's overwhelmed them. They weren't sure how to do a hook turn and now there's cars and trams and everyone's yelling at them and they just freak out and they get overwhelmed by it. But yeah. Luke, you don't like the trams telling you to hold on all the time. I think it's because if you don't hold on, you fall over. I've got catapulted on a tram once. I think someone like a pedestrian, either pedestrian or bike or something, sort of went right in front of the tram, thought they could just dodge in front of the tram, but the tram was just starting to accelerate, and they can't stop that quickly. They've got a lot of inertia going on. They've got a lot of mass. And I was going to see, and I was even doing the right thing. I was going pole to pole, like I was hanging onto a pole. I was heading towards the seat, hung onto a pole, walked to another one, and then the tram slammed on the brakes, like so hard, like it catapulted me backwards. Like I had my back to the direction the tram was going, and when it slammed on the brakes, I was airborne, and just wee, and landed on my back and ground. In fact, the thing that hurt most was the tips of my fingers, because as I got catapulted, I desperately lunged out and tried to grab the poles, and I didn't quite get them, and I sort of snapped my fingers across the edges of it. And when I say hurt, it's like not but falling on the ground really didn't hurt at all. The tips of my fingers were a bit sore, and I was lying there because I was winded, and I was just going, what the fuck? And the other passengers were concerned because I was fucking airborne. And they're trying to help me up, and the guy's gone to lift me up, but he's got me on the wrong angle, and he's pulling me away, and I go, I haven't got my feet under me, I can't get up. And he was like worried I was hurt, and he's pulling harder, and I'm going, no, pulling harder is not going to help because you've got me on the wrong angle and I haven't got my feet under me. But yeah, so I like catapulted a few meters, but it didn't hurt. Like I said, the thing that hurt most was just the tips of my fingers where I tried to grab a pole. I just landed flat on my back and got winded. All the passengers thought I was hurt though, but it was fine. Justin, that's a weird and honestly questionable sounding fact. Pepsi was once the world's 6th largest navy. That is an interesting thing. How Pepsi briefly became the 6th largest military in the world. That is a fun fact, Justin. I like that. So Dwight Eisenhower wanted to bring American culture to the Soviet Union to show them the benefits of capitalism. He sent Nixon, which was obviously a bad idea. Nixon and Khrushchev got into a fight, well, an argument. And the vice president of Pepsi was there and tried to distract the Soviet leader with a delicious Pepsi. And they wanted to bring Pepsi to the country permanently. They decided to buy Pepsi using universal. I love this story. Universal currency, vodka. This is in the 1980s. Okay. They want to serve Pepsi. So the Russians traded Pepsi a fleet of subs and boats for a whole lot of soda. Included 17 submarines, a cruiser, a frigate, and a destroyer. The combined fleet was traded for $3 billion worth of Pepsi. Russia really loved their Pepsi. And Pepsi sold the fleet to Sweden for scrap metal. But technically, when Pepsi owned those warships, they were the 6th most powerful military in the world. That's in the abstract, because there are obviously laws against operating as a military, but they had the hardware that technically made them a military force. But if they'd ever acted as a military, they would have been in contravention of the law. Musically, but you got in late because your mum was taking. So yeah, I was a little bit late because I was at the physio getting my broken shoulder. It's not broken, it's just old, my shoulder. Yes. So you've sent me the tank info. Cool. Luke, isn't Coke green before they color it? I have no idea. But they basically color Coke with caramel, so like burnt sugar. Hey, Belinda, how are you? Yes, facts of the feels. In Russia, Pepsi drink you. Yeah, apparently the Russians really liked Pepsi, but they couldn't actually trade currency with Western nations because their currency wasn't worth anything in Western nations. So they traded Pepsi for $3 billion worth of naval hardware. That is a wild story, and I thank you for sharing it, Justin. That is a wild story. I feel like I'd kind of heard that, but it wasn't completely familiar. It feels like one of those trivia things that I had heard before, but I've never really looked it up before now. And that is quite surreal. First, they traded a buttload of vodka for some Pepsi, and then when they couldn't do that, they traded billions of dollars worth of naval hardware. That's just weird. RC, okay, you have a two-pronged question. First, I really enjoyed Captain Marvel. It was a very fun film. Is definitely one of the better Marvel films. Really good action. Yes, but your second half thing, we're already getting the Ghostbuster style rage against it. The trolls and their bots flooding the voting sites with negative reviews. They're just pathetic. Hey, Rukazan, how's it going, buddy? Look, they did appear to have some sort of impact on the Ghostbusters movie, but that was the only one they had any effect on. Like their little racist asses railed against Black Panther, and it did incredibly well. You know, they railed against The Last Jedi. It did incredibly well. Now they're railing against, they railed against Wonder Woman as well. I think it was one of the more successful DC movies. And now they're railing against Captain Marvel, and it's doing really well. So this is my possibly unpopular opinion. I think the new Ghostbusters, the one with all the women in it, is considerably better than the original. I think it was funnier with better acting. It's kind of cheating to say it has better effects because, of course, it had better effects. I thought it had a better story, but I thought it was funnier with better acting and better story. Yeah, but same thing. The trolls have been all over female Doctor Who, but it's rated better than the show has for years. So again, it hasn't affected the actual audience despite this massive online circle jerk of misogynists. And I definitely rate the new Doctor Who quite highly. I really enjoyed Jodie Whittaker's series. I have to rewatch it. I haven't rewatched it yet. Yeah. Roxanne. yes, I am a charismatic stallion. Yeah, I'm doing fine. You know, my old body continues to send me to the physio as different bits of it give up. It's really weird. Like my shoulder was playing up a bit more. I was getting physio like all last year, not all last year, from about this time last year. In fact, thanks to Facebook and its your memories on Facebook, what you were doing a year ago, 2 years ago, all that shit. Today or yesterday, I had the 1 year ago memory was being up at 3 a.m. watching TV because I couldn't sleep because of how much pain I was in. Like I should have gone to the physio months earlier, as soon as I started to have slight problems. But being a bloke, I just thought, I'm fine. You get to the point where you can't sleep because of the amount of pain. And I finally went, because I'd never been to a physio before, finally went to a physio who was an enormous help. But yes. Facts. I've been into Doctor Who since I was a kid. So I was into the original Doctor Who, like Tom Baker was my Doctor. But the relaunch series, I've been quite a fan of. I think each of the Doctors has brought their own charm to the whole thing. I like, obviously I like some episodes more than others, but I'm quite the fan of all the new Doctors. Miles, how's it going there? Oh yeah, there are some Facebook memories that I've deleted when they've come up. There was a particular entrepreneurial venture I tried to do like 5 years ago, and it ended up not working, and it cost me a fucking absurd amount of money. Took me a couple of years to recover from. And so all my posts in the build up to that, as I'm getting closer to the event and trying to convince people to buy tickets to the event, the short version of which is no cunt bought tickets to the event. And so I had to pull the pin relatively late in the day. Yeah, when they started coming up, I don't remember if I did it last year. That's the one, English. I don't remember if I did it last year or the year before, but when they started coming up, I just started deleting them because it's like, I don't need to be reminded of the event, that because I took 6 months off work, like cost me $100,000 in lost wages. And then with the actual money I paid out with non-refundable deposits on various things, which I've never even properly added up because it's too awful and depressing, but it's somewhere in the region of $20,000 that I actually paid out. And yeah, and I don't need to be reminded of that, quite frankly. So, and I know because it was built up and I had some good people coming, and I had some people upset, like, oh, I booked some accommodation and tickets, that's awful. Oh, fuck me. You actually are out a couple $100. I feel real I actually did feel bad about it. But yeah, people trying to make me feel bad because they booked accommodation or flights and going, well, I blew about $20,000 and lost about another 100,000 in lost wages because I wasn't working, because I was working on this project. But yeah. Miss Fox, question, you just deleted social media. I can understand that feeling good. No, Facebook just actually shows you everything you posted a year ago and 2 years ago and 3 years ago and 4 years ago, etc. Miles, does anyone agree with the statement? In a civilized world, free speech is the only gift you give your enemy. I wouldn't say it's the only gift you give an enemy. If you're a decent person, you probably give your enemy mercy at some point. Unless you're a fascist, Nazi, then you don't give them mercy, but then you also don't give them free speech. So, but I get where you're coming on. It's an interesting thing that that is an interesting sort of philosophical statements that if you truly give out untrammeled free speech, that is a gift to your enemies. But again, it depends who we're talking about in terms of enemy as well. If it's literally just someone I disagree with on social or political or economic issues, I'm happy for them to express their views and have a political party and all that. It's but if it's the sort of people we're talking about now, the ones who worship Hitler, the the neo-Nazis and the neo-fascists, the extreme right-wingers, the hate mongers, the people who are actually whipping up hate and basically instigating violence. Fuck those people, shut them down. This is the thing, the people who blithe, and it's, you know, it's weird how this argument is dominated by straight white people, particularly straight white men, but it's like free speech, everyone should have it, because straight white people suffer very little damage from free speech, including hate speech. But the further you deviate from that safe zone, as in not being straight, not being white, not being male, the more often there is actual damage that goes with speech, like speech incites violence. And particularly, you know, when you're talking about the actual Nazis, the people who worship Hitler, who want a white ethno-state, who want to exterminate the lesser peoples, their speech is explicitly violence. Giving them speech is giving them the opportunity to instigate violence against vulnerable people. It's this idea that, oh, they should be allowed to say it. You should defeat them in the marketplace of ideas. They get defeated in the marketplace of a fucking boot in their face. Because that's what they're going to do. If you act as if they're going to magnanimously allow free speech, it's the first thing these right-wingers do, is curtail the free speech of anyone they don't like. Since the Howard days in Australia, the Liberal Party, oh, yes, we're about small government, the freedom of the individual. Horseshit. Since the Howard years, they've been trying to introduce sedition laws, basically what's the phrase? I'm trying to get the other line from 1984. Thought crime. These people who claim they're the free speech party, the party of small government, have spent decades trying to make thought crime a thing. Basically, if you say things the government doesn't like, they can jail you. It's like fucking ridiculous. And I mean, I think there are lots of examples all around the world of restrictions on people's freedom of expression. Too much. God, England, I think, goes really over the top. The libel and slander laws in Australia seem to go too far, quite honestly. Yeah, if you I'm saying the phrase, talk shit, get hit. Yes, Miles, it's catchy but uncivilized. But then again, like I said, I'm literally only like the whole thing about, oh, you know, should you punch Nazis? Yes. Yes, you should. Oh, where does it stop? No, with another Nazi, basically. Chronic, do we have the neo-Nazi prison gangs in Australia? I'm sure we do have white supremacist prison gangs. We have, like the rest of the world, we have white supremacists in the cops and white supremacists in the military as well. So, but yeah, I'm sure the gangs exist in prisons, and I'm sure there are divisions along racial and ethnic lines in prisons. Doesn't seem to be on the scale of how we get told it is in the US. Absolutely, Ms. Foxification. I'm 100% with you. The people who are at the neo-Nazi end of the spectrum, the idea that you should just give them free speech when they don't want others to have free speech, and they're going to use any platform you give them to incite violence. I mean, even down to the incels on their various forums, when far too late, a couple of online forums realized they had to shut down the incel forums because they're just seething beds of violence. There's been several mass shootings in the US, well, in North America, because one was in Canada, there have been several mass shootings that were the direct product of these incel forums, where they're just this horrible little recursive swamp of hate and violence. And there's been at least 3 or 4 mass shootings that came directly from the incel forums. Fuck knows how many others had their minds poisoned by these forums. Yeah, Chronic, you're not 100 miles off the mark there with Columbine. Though those guys didn't have the same internet forums as exist now, but style-wise, they're sure not 100 miles removed from the incels today. Yeah. Facts over feels potentially unpopular opinions. Love these. Attempt at nuance. You can say, I hate group as much as like them. When you say kill group, we have a problem. One advocates, yeah, look, but that's the thing. See, facts over feels. When I talk about, you know, if I use the term that I hate Trump supporters, I'm not advocating killing Trump supporters, but those extreme white nationalist groups, they're the worst ones. They are explicitly about the violent suppression of other people and violent attacks on other people, and they've been directly responsible for so many shootings in the States. So I would agree with you that you notice I never say kill Nazis either, but shut them the fuck down. At the very least, deplatform them. The idea that the Nazis get free speech is fucking horseshit, because all they want to do is kill them. Well, Miles, a short version of how a lot of people differentiate between patriotism and nationalism is patriotism, I love my country. Nationalism is I'm going to kill anyone outside of my country and anyone who doesn't fit the frame I define as my country. So that's a simplified version of how a lot of people see the difference between patriotism and nationalism. Yep. I think you've got a nail on the head there, misclassification. The extremists, the Nazis, the MRAs who preach violence, the white nationalists, and I almost said vegans when I meant incels, because I think I had virgins in my mind. Yeah, the ones who are preaching violence, shut them the fuck down. Yeah, nationalism is basically, historically has been when you want to kill people who aren't your people. Patriotism is pride in your people. Nationalism is I'm going to kill anyone who's not my people. Nationalism is when, yeah, you're going to kill the other. I sort of called the this stream, I was going to DNA test Mark Latham. This is a fun little story in Australia for those who don't know about it. This fucking fringe racist minority party, One Nation, whose newest recruit is a former leader of the Labor Party, which is the major progressive party in Australia. And so he had a chance of being Prime Minister once. He ran in an election as opposition leader, but lost to John Howard. And he's since shown himself to be completely unhinged. And honestly, during that election campaign, there were a couple of warning signs about how unhinged he was. But in the years since, he's gotten very, 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 very bad. And his latest shit he's spouting because he wants to get elected in the New South Wales election for One Nation. He's got about, everyone's sick of people bludgeon on welfare payments and people claiming they're Aborigines when they're not. One nation's got to introduce DNA testing, and you can only get benefits for being an Aboriginal if you pass the DNA test, which the whole thing is fucking nonsense on a number of levels. I mean, what do you, like, if you're familiar with the phrase dog whistling, what people usually mean dog whistling racism, because of course a dog whistle is a whistle that the tone is a pitch that's above human hearing, but dogs can hear it. So you can use it to train dogs. And so the idea is dog whistles here, the people you're aiming at hear what you want them to hear. Like you blow the whistle, it's not making a whistle noise, but the dogs hear it. You dog whistle your racism, you don't actually say, I hate black people, but you use the phrases so the other racists know that you're self-identifying as a racist. But what Latham did is not dog whistling. It's like the opposite. It's megaphoning. It's air raid sirening. Latham was air raid sirening his racism and his call to appeal to racists. And him saying he's got to DNA test people who want to claim Aboriginal identity is fucking ridiculous. First, the one nation will never have power and can never introduce any policy, so anything they say is complete horseshit. Second, you're saying there's going to be a DNA test. Against what? What unequivocal DNA evidence is there? The Aboriginal people, in terms of being defined as an Indigenous Australian, because there is actually a legal standard for it. And it is three-pronged. I think there is a blood test, a DNA test as part of it, but that's not solely it. There's also parentage, like if you can prove like one or both of your parents had been identified as Indigenous, then so are you. And the third part is being accepted by elders. Like you basically tell your story, and this is my family and whatnot, and you go, yeah, you are. So there are the three qualifiers. Latham's saying he's going to DNA test people who claim to be Aboriginal is just racist bullshit on a number of levels, not least one nation have no power. They will never be able to introduce any policy. So anything they say about policy is complete bullshit and just pandering to their racist base. Yeah, so there's that. Plus the DNA test it doesn't make sense. There's not like a database of, okay, you have to have these DNA traits to show that you have Indigenous ancestry. It's like, fucking hell. So far, I don't think one nation can even run a fish and chip shop very well. What's the joke that Hanson's old fish and chip shop's a Chinese takeaway now? I don't know. Yeah, Miles Herb, I guess I'm the wrong person to ask how Indigenous Australians like to identify. Do they identify with the term Australian? I think they do identify with the term Australian. You know, there are various ways people refer to Indigenous populations, Indigenous or Aboriginal or First Nations people. Justin, you're saying what's your threshold? You've got 0.2% Native American DNA. I'd say that's a big no. But like I said, in Australia, there is the three-tiered thing. If you say, it's exactly what I said, there's usually three-tier. were your parents identified as Indigenous or Native people? And do the Native elders recognize you as being part of their people? So the DNA is actually only part of it, because then, you know, if you say it's down to DNA, there's always going to be a cutoff point. And if you even if you said like it had to be 15%, I'm just making that up off the top of my head, right? Is it really fair if you put if that was your sole method of measuring it, and you said 15% is the cutoff, and someone tests as 14.9%, is that really fair to cut them out? How different is someone with 14.9% native DNA to 15%? So and that's why, while no definition along those lines is going to be perfect, the one used in Australia is not bad. Like I said, if one or both of your parents has previously been identified as Indigenous, that's part of it. And then also it's just being recognized by the elders as like, yeah, this person is part of our people. So that is generally how the classification is made now. And Latham and his fuckhead DNA thing is just him being an obnoxious, shit-eating, reactionary fuckwit. And goddamn. Miles, okay. James Huey Watson having his Nobel Prize revised for his controversial stance. His stance isn't controversial. It's wrong and it's racist. He's a horrible racist. He's citing ridiculous, stupid, outdated bullshit, and he absolutely deserves everyone's censure. It's not controversial. It's racist and factually wrong. He's using outdated race-based science to justify being a hideous racist prick. Ugh. Linda, I'm pretty sure a DNA test on Latham won't show any alien DNA. It'll just show fucking he's more pond scum than human. He's somehow become, through some sort of toxic radiation leak, some pond scum became animated and takes on this vaguely human form. Oh, misfoxification. I get what you did there. Wouldn't be surprised if Latham has a little Andrew Bolt in him. Hey? Well, at least one of them's had his tongue up the other one's ass, I'll say that much. But good old Alan Jones is what donated $10,000 to the One Nation election campaign. Jesus. Justin Latham's back on Sky. Wasn't he fired for calling? He was fired for harassing a kid. Yeah. I forget the exact context, but he went too far even for Sky, and they went, no, you can't do that. So if he's back on Sky, I assume he's just being interviewed rather than being a presenter. But I don't know, because like 99% of Australia, I don't watch Sky News. The only people who watch Sky News are politicians and some journos. No one else fucking watches it. It's got the worst ratings in the world. I think more people watch me than watch Sky News. That's bad. Hey, David, how's it going? Luke, what Turnbull comments have you seen? He normally says oh, Jesus, yeah. Well, I mean, Mr. 09, yeah. Aung San Suu Kyi. Her name's so hard to pronounce. Aung San Suu Kyi. She not only failed to call out the genocide on the Rohingyas, she seemed to be fucking complicit in it, quite frankly. Safa, do old white men vote Liberal? Around the world, there's a fairly consistent trend with older people generally being more conservative in their voting, but particularly older white people, older white men do tend to be the most conservative. Younger people, this is not universal, but younger people tend to be more progressive, even leaning towards radical. Oh yeah, Belinda, I saw Barnaby Joyce wants to be Deputy PM. Jesus, what's that about? That guy is so disconnected from reality. And he's starting a fight with the Liberal Party because the Liberal Party, it's like it's finally sinking into them that their climate change denial is hurting them electorally. Forget what they're doing to the planet. It's affecting them electorally. And Barnaby Joyce thinks he's speaking for the National Party in that, no, we're going to be nothing but coal. It's like, oh, fuck off, dude. Jesus. In fact, you reckon he's been drinking again? I reckon he's been smoking crack. Yeah, just the idea that only, we're less than 3 months from the election, I reckon. Wait, let's see. We've just started March. We're less than 3 months from the election. The idea that the Nationals would change leadership this close to the election is fucking ridiculous. And the idea that the only impetus behind the change is Barnaby's ego is fucking ridiculous. Oh, yeah. His name is Voxification Aung San Suu Kyi, pronouncing it wrong. Yeah, I don't know how much of it was she was so desperate to hold on to power that she sucked up to the military and started defending the military. And I don't know how much is just that she decided she was part of the power structure now, and she doesn't give a shit about the Rohingya. She doesn't give a shit that there was an attempted genocide on them. I don't know. She's somewhere between being thoroughly awful and kind of awful. Yeah. Oh, yes. New South Wales seems to be 50-50. No one knows which way New South Wales is going to. No one knows is if anyone's even going to win a majority government in New South Wales. That's the interesting one. But we'll find that out because it's not that far off the election. Imsy's come to say hello again. But yeah, so it'll be very interesting to see what sort of swing happens against the Liberals in New South Wales. And there'll also be an interesting test, like in the very conservative areas. It'll be interesting to see how many independent conservatives can knock off the major party conservative. So, yeah. Yes, Music Area should put political ads on the Opera House. That'd work. Miles, does Australia have residential schools too? I'm not sure what residential schools are. You have to help me out with what that actually is. We have boarding schools. That sounds like what you're talking about, but I'm not 100% sure. Belinda, you don't reckon the New South Wales opposition leader is up to? I don't know. I have not been paying that much attention to New South Wales politics. So I honestly, I don't know. I don't know how the people of New South Wales see it. The latest polls do seem to have at like 50-50. No one is sure that anyone's even going to get a majority government there. So who knows? Mimsy wants lots of attention. She's headbutting me, aren't you? You're so pushy. You're so pushy. Yeesh. All right. Oh my God, you're such a sicky cat. You want so much attention. Yeesh. Yeesh, you do. Oh, I finished my tropical juice. Ooh, the halfway mark. Yeah, Miles, that's a somewhat universal practice, and particularly British colonies. They've always worked with take Indigenous native people off their traditional lands, move them around, force them to assimilate, go for genocide when that doesn't work. Yeah, I mean, one of the theories, because like in White Australia appears, and what we, as Musical Avid is saying, they have the stolen generation. A lot of mixed race Aboriginal kids were forcibly removed from their families and communities and put into boarding schools or adopted by well-meaning white families. And one of the theories around that is mixed race kids. They were often illegitimate, like some, particularly if it was like a white landowner who had fathered illegitimate Aboriginal kids. Technically, legally, those kids would have a claim to the family farm, and they didn't want any of that nonsense happening. So they forcibly removed them from their communities and took their lives away from them, took their history away from them, and had them adopted out into white families to get rid of the idea that, well, they had any connection to the Indigenous people, and to get away from the idea that they had a legal right to inherit from their white fathers. But yes. All right, I might make myself iron a drink. Ooh, what are we doing, Lindsay? What are we doing? Oh, wait, there's a little bit of this one. A little bit of this one. This, I think, is pina colada tequila. Might make this with some lemonade. This is like slightly green. Looks a bit yellower there. It's greener in real life. She must stop rubbing her head against me. She just wants all this attention. Don't you? You want the attention, don't you? Let me get some lemonade. I think it's just back here. Do. All right. You like pina coladas and getting caught in the rain. This is, if I remember rightly, this is like silver tequila, clear tequila, that I dissolved some pina colada flavored jelly bellies into. Okay, I might add a bit of my tropical juice as well, because I've just emptied. Right. All right. Yeah, Miles. Yes, the British were among the first to outlaw slavery. They were also the ones who started it. So, yes. Chronic, that's a good question. How did Australia go from some sort of jail to a regular country? Well, slowly, because England kept transporting its criminals out here for quite a long time. But there was also, you know, the opportunity to make a new life here, because there was not much social movement in England, very stratified society, and there was much more opportunity to come out to the colonies and reinvent yourself. Grant Gregory, you went out to feed a homeless cat. Well, I've got my homed cat. So, yeah, Chronic, the change, I guess, was gradual, because there were convicts being shipped out here well into the 1800s. But eventually, yeah, you know, the colony expanded, and different things happened. Like there was a gold rush in the 1800s, brought a lot of people here. Migrant populations started to diversify in the 20th century, but not that quickly. But there was a big surge after World War II of Mediterranean and Central European migrants, as opposed to just being English migrants. And then in the 70s, we started to get more Vietnamese migrants and refugees, a big part of our culture. And more recently, we've had an influx of African migrants and refugees. Safa, when did the British soldiers leave Australia? 1900? I guess Australia only became an independent country with its own parliament in January 1st, 1901. Up until then, we were a colonial outpost. Oh, Miles, you make a good point. Slavery in and of itself is a thing that humans seem to have done forever. So I was literally talking about the modern chattel slavery trade. But you are right, the concept of slaves seems to be as old as humans, basically. So Ms. Fox, Indigenous people might be suffering moral injury with PTSD symptoms, yes. Concept emphasizes psychological, social, cultural, spiritual aspects of trauma, distinct from pathology. Moral injury is a normal human response to an abnormal traumatic event. Yes, well, and in case of Indigenous Australians, a traumatic event that's been extended over a couple of centuries and continues to today. Justin, I don't know what you mean by a British Dominion, saying Australia was a British Dominion until the middle of World War II. We are still, our head of state is the monarch of England. We have our own parliament, and have had since 1901. I'm not aware of, I don't know if you just mean philosophically we were a British Dominion until middle of World War II. We did have the problem in World War II. All our troops had been shipped all around the world, and we had the problem with an impending Japanese invasion. They moved further and further across Asia, kicked the Americans out of the Philippines, kicked the Americans and British out of Singapore, and then started to move down through Papua New Guinea. And they were going to invade Australia, and all our troops were in the European theatre. Well, most of them were actually, I think, either in the European theatre or Africa, North Africa, Churchill was controlling the movements of our military, and the Australian Prime Minister Curtin realised Australia was under imminent threat of invasion. He's saying to Churchill, we need to bring our troops back. We need to defend the country. We're going to be invaded. And Churchill notoriously didn't give a shit, and said something to the effects like, who cares if the Japanese take Australia? After we deal with Hitler, we'll take it back. Unsurprisingly, that attitude was not as popular in Australia. And Curtin did eventually get our veteran troops back from Africa. But prior to that, this is a famous thing you'll hear some people talk about, the Kokoda Trail in Papua New Guinea. The advancing Imperial Japanese Army, which was undefeated for like a decade. They'd taken China, and then after the declaration of war against the US, they moved all through Asia and were down through Papua New Guinea, heading towards Australia. They had never been defeated. Our last line of defense were reservists. They had never seen active duty, and they were thrown into jungle warfare with this fighting force that hadn't been defeated in 10 years, and they stopped them. Against all odds, they stopped them. And they stopped them for long enough that Curtin got our veteran troops back from Africa and Europe, and finally pushed the Japanese back for the first fucking time. And then the Americans joined in as well, because they'd retreated from their Pacific bases, and then it gave the big push back. But yes. Justin, you sound notably better read on Australian political history than me. You're saying Brits could legislate over us until we pass the Statute of Westminster, and you're saying Australian citizenship didn't exist until the 1960s? Okay, this is another one that's outside my area of expertise. I'm actually fairly shit. Okay, I think this might be nuances. Okay, here's a history. At Federation, which is when we had our own parliament, British subject was the sole civic status noted in the Australian Constitution. So we're all still British subjects, which technically we kind of still are, because the monarch of Britain is our head of state. So apparently a convention prior to Federation wasn't able to agree on a definition for what a citizen was and wanted to preserve British nationality. Here we go. British subjects who are permanent residents, those who are merely visitors, it was necessary for the Commonwealth to exercise its power over immigration and deportation. Motivated by nationalism of Arthur Calwell, administrative concept was formalised in the Nationality and Citizenship Act of 1948. In 1958, the Act was amended so that naturalisation could only be revoked if obtained by fraud. Through the 60s, Australian citizens were still required to declare their nationality as British. The term Australian nationality had no official recognition or meaning until the Act was amended in 1969. Wow. And in 1973, the Act was renamed the Australian Citizenship Act, and it was not until 1984 that Australian citizens ceased to be British subjects. That will fall under Morty's mind blowers, actually. Well, I will just say, Justin, you're far better read in Australian history than me. Miles, what do I think of Japan's conservative values? Fuck, the Japanese nationalists are scary as fuck, basically. No, absolutely. Japan's an ethno state. That's no question, man. And the hard right, the Japanese nationalists are scary as fuck. They're in denial about World War II. They blatantly deny the war crimes of the Japanese Empire. Japanese nationalists are fucking scary. They are really fucking scary. And you're right, Safa, the Australian dollar was introduced in 1966. Prior to that, we used pounds. They were Australian pounds, but we used pounds. And yes, Justin, you're right. Their constraints on immigration and citizenship is actually really damaging them economically. But man, conservative nationalists in Japan are fucking freaky, and they're quite powerful as well. Well, David, you better not run for Parliament, buddy. Your parents born in the UK. You would definitely be a dual citizen. You would have to renounce. There's a formal process. You'd have to renounce your British citizenship to get into Parliament. And I think, Safa, could you use Australian pounds in the UK? I believe the answer to that is no. I don't really have anything to base that on apart from a gut feel. Japan has good gun laws. You have some saving graces. Look, there's heaps I like about Japanese culture. My kids, like a lot of their generation, keep calling them kids, they're young adults now. They are very into Eastern culture. They like, they like Japanese games, Japanese music, anime, manga. They like Korean music as well. And both my kids are studying a lot of Japanese, actually, like Japanese language. My daughter's doing a degree in linguistics, majoring in Japanese. Yeah, I mean, there's lots about Japanese culture I like. But the hard right nationalists in Japan, scary as fuck. And then like the big one that they won't admit to the hideous war crimes perpetrated in the name of the emperor. The Japanese Imperial Army was guilty of just the worst war crimes. And the Japanese nationalists refused to acknowledge that. Very bad. Miles, you're pro gun. Look, man, I like guns. I grew up in the country. I like target shooting, particularly. I don't like hunting. I don't like killing animals. I'll admit to thinking guns are cool, actually, but the insanity that happens in the United States, it's just become disconnected from reality, and it's why so many thousand people are killed by guns in America every year. It's why they have these fucking mass shootings. There's some sort of cultural. It's not just the guns. The easy availability of guns is a very, 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 very big problem. But there's some sort of cultural sickness going along with it as well. It's very fucking weird. Safi, can't blaspheme against the Thai king. So I did in videos, because that law is called les majestes. The Latin means you can't say anything bad about the monarch. So I did. It's fun. Through various things I learn. Whenever I learn a country has a law, it's like an anti-sedition law, or like les majestes, where it's an offense to criticize the ruler, I make a video where I say I've got a video of them fucking goats. Technically, there are quite a few countries I can't travel to, because if they linked me to videos I made criticizing their leaders in incredibly crass ways, I would be arrested, and Thailand's one of them. I love Thailand, but I don't like the idea of a law that says you're not allowed to criticize the king. Fuck that. Oh, Miles, you're a hunter. Well, look, I know hunters as well, so people are quite friendly with. I'm just saying, for me personally, I have shot animals. I've shot birds. Don't think I've shot anything bigger than a bird. But I mean, man, I grew up in the country. People go fucking pig shooting and roo shooting. I mean, that's crazy. Fuck, where I come from, pig shooting, because you get pigs, which were farm animals. But if they escape, they go feral. They revert to fucking. They grow. I don't know how this works, but within a generation, they're these big fucking hairy. These pink pigs in a pub. Why did I say pub? Farm. Pink. There might be pigs in a pub. There are probably pubs that have pigs, but I'm thinking about farms. I think there's too many p words. Pink pigs. Pink pigs in a pub. No, pink pigs on a farm. But if they escape, they go feral. And within a generation, they're like big, hairy, wild boars, and with fucking tusks. And guys I knew on farms, they'd go out pig shooting, the razorbacks, as we call them. And it's spotlighting. They go out at night with their ute or their truck, with big spotlights on it to pick out the animal's eyes in the dark, with their fucking high-powered rifles and shotguns and fucking shoot pigs. And those things are scary. So I tell you what else is scary: feral cats. Domestic cats escape and go feral, and within one generation, they are wild animals. And they get really fucking big. They are big and scary. And I mean, again, where I grew up, not so much. I grew up in town, surrounded by farms. Town where I grew up, the 20 years I lived there, the population went from about 12,000 to 22,000. I mean, if I look up the population now, it's probably much bigger than when I was living there. Town's called Dubbo, which is actually an insult. Okay, it's edging up to 40,000. So it's way more than twice as big as when I was a kid. It's probably less than twice as big as when I left. But yeah, I grew up in town, and there were farms all around. And decor on the farms, it was pretty common for it to be animal hides. Like, it'd be a rug, there'd be a sheepskin rug, which was actually one of their sheep that they'd slaughtered and skinned and tanned the hide, and there'd be a sheepskin rug, or a cowhide rug. Or there'd be kangaroo hides as well, because they'd shoot kangaroos. And that's actually fairly common decor in farms. And I think they were like cousins, slightly obscure cousins. I was at their farm, and they had the usual decor of cowhide, sheepskin, kangaroo hide. And there was this one, and it was about this big, and it was white with really long, soft hair. And I couldn't work out what it was. Like, I thought, that's too big to be a rabbit. What else could it be? And I was trying to work it out. And he goes, "You've worked out what it is?" And no, I haven't. He goes, "It's a cat." And you skinned your cat? No, it was feral. Didn't look that pretty when I shot it, because it'd been feral for a while, so its fur was all matted with mud and stuff. And it was fucking huge. Like, it was more than twice the size of Mimsy. It was apparently Persian, because when he killed it, when he skinned it and cleaned the fur, it was this really long, pure white fur. So apparently it was a fucking Persian that had gone feral. But yeah. Miles, ravens, a group of ravens is called an unkindness. Yes, an unkindness of ravens, a murder of crows. That family of birds have the best names. A parliament of rooks. Let's look that up now. Collective nouns, birds. Here's a few: a wake of buzzards, which is nice. A confusion of chiff-chaffs. Don't even know what chiff-chaffs are. Commotion. What the fuck is that? What's coots? An asylum of cuckoos. That's pretty good. A curfew of curlews. Yes, murder of crows. What's magpies? Magpies has well, that whole sort of family. Ooh, a conspiracy of ravens. I like that. A murmuration of starlings. A crown of kingfishers. Well, that makes sense. Kingfishers. Conspiracy of ravens. A booby of nuthatches. You gotta love that. No, what's magpies? A mischief. I knew magpies had a good one. A mischief of magpies. A pitying of turtle doves. That's a weird one. Collective nouns are hilarious. Yes, you're right. A flock of seagulls, I read, for an asshole of liberals. A subreddit of MRAs. Misfoxification. A group of Indonesian mountain weasels is called a bubblegum of weasels. I don't think they ever need a funny collective. I just love Indonesian mountain weasels. That sounds like a name for a heavy metal band. Next up, the Indonesian mountain weasels. Dun, 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 dun. That'd be pretty good. A giggle of magpies. I love the warbling of magpies. In this neighborhood, we have a lot of magpies. I think people feed them because they're super friendly and they're not really scared of people at all. I've seen them awful lot. I went out to a friend's place who lives a few suburbs farther out, and they were having a barbecue. And when the barbecue started, I shit you not, like a couple dozen magpies all gathered, like on their garage roof. I was going, what the hell is that? It looks like we're in a Hitchcock film. And I said, oh no, we feed them. And they know when a barbecue starts, we'll have some meat, we'll feed them. So they just had this huge group of magpies that would show up to be fed. But the ones around here don't really cluster like that. But I have seen people feed them, but also they really don't seem scared of people. And they'll just hop around. And there's a lot of, we have magpies and currawongs and the occasional crow. But I love the warbling of magpies. And the currawongs have this 3-note song. I think the magpies do it sometimes too. It's like, there's the whistle. I do like the magpie's warble. It's very hard to reproduce, but it's a really sort of complex whistle. Oh, you've got rainbow lorikeets. We get a lot of rainbow lorikeets around here, Charlie. And yeah, they're really obnoxious. They're very pretty. They're an incredibly beautiful bird. They're very obnoxious. The collectives come up with politicians, a pack of liars, a kitty fiddlers of Catholics. Contraception of incels, nice. Chronic, we don't have any hummingbirds. And honestly, that's one of the few things I feel hard done by. When I see videos and photos from North Americans and hummingbirds, you set out feeders, hummingbirds will come and they'll even eat out of your hand. That's one of the few things I feel hard done by. We don't have hummingbirds because hummingbirds look so cute. I really like them. Mystery 9, could the lyrebird imitate magpie cries? Easy. For those who don't know, the Australian, one of the rarer Australian birds, it's a flightless bird, I'm pretty sure. I'm not 100% sure. The lyrebirds, L-Y-R-E, because its tail feathers do form a shape very reminiscent of the ancient instrument, the lyre, the harp. Although the name's almost a pun, as in liar, as in not telling the truth, because lyrebirds are phenomenal mimics. They will mimic other birds, but they mimic any sounds they hear. In more recent history, lyrebirds have been found to do very convincing mimics of, basically just prior to digital cameras, the film cameras, 35mm cameras that had a motor wind on them that went zzz, 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 zzz. Lyrebirds would reproduce that. They reproduce car alarms, as Misfoxification said, mobile phone ringtones. They are amazing mimics. They don't usually do human voices, but they can make sounds that sound a lot like human voices. They can do dog barks and cat meows and other bird calls. Lyrebirds are amazing mimics. They are wild. Oh, Miles, I saw a video of a raven in England talking in a northern accent, saying, "You're all right, love." It was really wild. It was doing people's heads in, because they can mimic human voices, but they don't very often. And I've seen the video of this raven talking with a northern accent, saying, "You're all right, love." It's wild. And of course, parrots are the most famous for mimicking humans and learning words. But that whole family of birds, the magpie, crow, raven, if they really want to, they can learn to mimic a human. They can do that. Oh, that's a wild one. We have a misfoxification. We have a moth that looks and behaves like a hummingbird hawk moth. Man, actually, here's the thing. Okay, anyone who knows me, who's been in the live chats, will know by most definitions, I'm an atheist. I think the idea of a creator, a supreme being, is fucking ridiculous, quite honestly. And I think it's irrelevant whether one exists or not. But when you look at the complexity of nature and just the fucking weird stuff that exists in nature, in the plant world, in the insect world, animal world, the bird world, like there is some fucking weird, inexplicable shit out there. I actually understand people looking at it and going, "God did that." And someone says, "Well, no, that's an accident of evolution. That's just a series of mutations over billions of years resulted in that." And you go, nah, that didn't happen by accident. Look at it. It's perfect. God did that. I don't agree, but I can understand people looking at certain things and going, "That's a miracle. The existence of that thing is a miracle, and it's proof of God." I don't agree, but I can understand why people look at it and go, "Oh, you're telling me that it evolved by chance? No way, buddy. No way." And the reason a lot of people have a lot of trouble understanding and believing evolution is they look at things that exist now, whether it's us or whether it's something else, and they go, "How did all those billions of years of chance form that perfect thing?" They go, "It's not about the end point. Evolution isn't saying we were always coming to that end point. Evolution basically says the end point is unpredictable. But what happened over millennia, over millions and billions of years, is a series of changes happened, and the changes just spiraled out in inexplicably complicated ways, and gave us what we have now." But it's wrong to look at something now and look at it and go, "How could evolution have produced that?" It's not how it works. It's not like it wasn't always leading to this point. It was this indescribably complex web of mutations resulted in that. That was not a predetermined outcome. It wasn't, and I think that's where a lot of people who either don't understand or reject evolution have a problem. They go, "I don't know how we got to there." You go, evolution doesn't predict that we got to here. Evolution is how we got here, but it didn't predict how we got to here. Like, you can't go back a billion years and say this will inevitably lead to this, because the system's too complex for you to predict it. You can backtrack and see the changes over time, but you can't predict the changes because they're too complex. You want Minzy to have superpowers? Minzy, do you have any superpowers? Meow. Do you have any superpowers? No? No? You're going to come up here? Yeah, come up here. Just come up to sit on my lap. Yeah, Ms. Foxcate, it's simple that beneficial mutations propagate because they increase odds of survival, but you can't predict the path of these mutations. And I think that's where a lot of people who don't understand or reject evolution fall down because they think, or how did you predict it? We go, no, it's not about, we're not the inevitable end state of evolution. We're the product of evolution, but you couldn't have predicted the rise of humans, and you couldn't have predicted the wildest fuck things that exist on this planet. I mean, seriously, you look at, you know, there's the whole range of, you know, normal animals, cats and dogs and birds, but there's some full-on weird birds out there. There are some full-on weird insects. There are some full-on weird plants out there. So you can't predict where things will go. That's not evolution. Miles, what about chickens? To the best of my knowledge, chickens are selective breeding by humans. Chickens don't exist in the wild. Certain fowl exist in the wild, like wild turkeys and smaller wild fowl, and humans domesticated them and used selective breeding over generations. And that's how they got to where they are. Like, humans have shown they can radically change a creature in only a few generations with selective breeding. Like, the change humans can bring about in a breed in 100 years is phenomenal. So you let nature run its course for millions of years, and amazing things can happen. All birds come from dinosaurs. We're now realizing it's incredibly likely the majority of dinosaurs were feathered, because the birds are as closely related to dinosaurs as lizards are. We even call the birds of prey raptors, and there's a particular breed of dinosaur known as raptors. Justin, if we ever find evidence of life, past life on Mars, that's going to do people's head in. That's going to challenge a lot of religions for a start. Oh yeah, Safa, of course, ancient humans didn't understand DNA or evolution. But once, I think humans for a very long time regarded themselves as completely different to animals, above animals, completely different. Whereas, you know, once humans got into farming and cultivation, they learned they were able to change things. Like, you know, wild wolves became domesticated dogs. Wild oxen became cows. Humans knew they could change animals, but humans thought they were completely different to animals and above them and didn't change like animals do. Whereas we know humans have evolved quite considerably over time. Chronic, he wants to find Tasmanian tigers. Don't know, man. I think it's not impossible, but I think we would have seen Tasmanian tigers if any were still alive. 100%. You had a forced Windows update. Lost context of what we're talking about. Miles Ebb, what if we find human or human-like remains on Mars? I don't think that's likely, but fuck, man. We keep finding surprises on our own planet. You know, we haven't even surveyed 1% of Mars. The number of surprises we could still get. It's amazing. It is a shame Tasmanian tigers are extinct, because they were amazing animals. That fucking jaw of theirs. Have you seen, like, it's got a greyhound-like body with the tiger stripes and this head with a jaw that just opened up like that. They're an amazing animal. As an author I like, Scott Westerfeld. He writes speculative fiction mostly for the young adult market. He has a very good series known as the Uglies series. The first book's called Uglies, and then the second book's called Pretties, and the third one's called Specials. Then there was like an add-on called Extras, and he's just released a new book in the same world. But he has another one that's like these steampunk science fiction, and it's set in the lead up to World War One, but there's all this steampunk technology, and the Western Europeans are really into messing with DNA, and the Eastern Europeans are really into mechanization. The Western Europeans call the Eastern Europeans clankers because they have all these giant mechanoid machines, transports, weapons, and the Western Europeans are more into genetically modifying animals, and they have all these, and they have weaponized genetically modified animals. They have things that look like zeppelins but are actually living things that they've genetically modified. And one of the characters meets a scientist who's one of the leading Darwinian, they call them Darwinians, I think, one of the leading genetic scientists, and she has a pet Tasmanian tiger. And when the character sees her pet, which is this weird as fuck looking dog with tiger stripes and this big head and jaws that open twice as wide as a normal dog, he just goes, Jesus, how the fuck did you genetically engineer that dog? What's it spliced with? And she said, oh no, I didn't make this. This is a naturally occurring animal from Australia. It was a fun thing. It was in this world of these really wildly genetically engineered animals that have become weaponized. Tasmanian tiger is such a weird, thylacine is such a weird looking animal. Someone assumes it's also genetically modified. Oh, good Lord. This Fox question about the update. After installing update, users may notice graphic and mouse performance degradation with desktop gaming when playing certain games such as Destiny. Some people are getting 1 frame per second in games. Shit. No, I haven't played any games on my PC in a while. And the only games I have installed are quite old ones. Like I play Borderlands 2 sometimes, and the Borderlands pre-sequel. God, I want them to do another one. I love those games. Oh my God, this Fox occasion, you think that update actually deleted people's data? Oh man, okay. I don't know if there was an update on my computer, but I noticed some performance issues. Oh, sorry, Timothy, you asked me that before. Have I done Dad of Boy, God of War? I haven't gone back to it. Timothy doesn't want to get off my lap. I just moved my leg in the hope she'd get off, but she just adjusted her position. I haven't. I keep thinking about going back and playing it. I also keep thinking of getting Red Dead Redemption 2, but I think that would just absorb me for hundreds of hours. You know, I also think about playing Zelda Breath of the Wild again. I fucking love that game. It was so much fun. There was so much to do in it. I just loved exploring the world in Zelda Breath of the Wild. Safras, only if you had 2 hard drives, you'd lose data. I've got 3 hard drives on my computer. That doesn't bode well, does it? I'd be very upset if I lose my data, my pictures or videos. I better do some backups. I have backups of all my important stuff, but I haven't backed up my videos for a couple months. I have, I don't know, half a dozen external hard drives with all my videos over the years. I haven't counted for a while. I know I've got over 10 terabytes of external drives. I kept all my raw video from all my years on YouTube, as well as the edited stuff. I don't know why. I've never gone back to it. You think, one day I might want to go back and use that old footage. I should keep it. Never gone back and used it. So I've got like 13-year-old video footage that's just been sitting on a hard drive. I reckon the drive's probably corrupted. I don't know. But technology, we rely on it so much. I've been avoiding like cloud-based storage because I was worried about the cost. I was worried about it getting corrupted and losing it. But God, the unreliable nature of local hard drives. Every now and then I think, maybe I should go closer. But I can't do it with all my historical video because, like I said, it's way over 10 terabytes. I can't put 10 terabytes in cloud storage. And it's ridiculous. I just have to, but I'd like to do it with my photos at least. Because, you know, I've got photos over my offspring's entire life. I'd like to make sure I don't lose those. But, yeah, I'd be really miffed if I had this, my first digital camera. No, it wasn't my first, it was my second. My second one was better than my first. I had a digital camera. It was I think it was a Sony. It was this huge thing, and it used floppy disks for storage. So I think it would save 10 to 12 photos on a floppy disk. So that told you how big the files were. It was about 100 kilobytes for a photo file. So they were not very big photos. But it was super cool because floppy disks as a fucking storage medium was so easy. Just slot one in, take a couple of photos and pop it out. So the photos were about 100 kilobytes in size, thereabouts. And you could also record video about somewhere between 10 and 15 seconds of quite low quality video. And I have a couple of bits of video I shot of my kids when they were very young. So this is like 17 years ago. So this is video from 17 years ago, 17, 18 years ago. My kids were quite little. When my lad was a baby, because he's like 18 now. So he's a baby. So the video is like 17, 18 years old. But I swear to God, this one bit of video I shot that I can't find, that got lost somewhere, would get 1 billion hits, would be a viral hit on the internet if I could find it. Because he's a baby. He's this super cute, chubby little baby who loves like his chicken drumettes. We have these homemade chicken drumettes, like a honey soy thing, and he fucking loves them. Like, I think he's less than a year old, but he's like going hog wild on these chicken drumettes. Just this, your cute chubby baby going, he loves it. It's the best thing ever, this little chicken drumette that he's chowing down on, and he's getting the sauce all over his face. So he looks really cute. I'm just videoing going, do you like that? Do you? And she's going, and he was so into it, like he loved the drumette so fast. He fell asleep with one of the bones still in his mouth. So I've got one bit of video of him just going hog wild on these chicken drumettes like they're the best thing ever. And that's cute enough. But then I've got another little 10 seconds of video. He's sitting in a high chair and he's fallen asleep sitting up. He's gone into a food coma. and he's got the drumette bone sticking out of his mouth, and he's got like the honey soy marinade sauce all over his face. And I'm just trying to wake him. Like, you awake, little buddy? You awake? What's happening? You fall asleep with a chicken bone in your mouth? He's just asleep, and he's got a bone sticking out of his mouth. And it was so funny. And I lost that footage. I swear to God, if I found it, I'd put it on the internet. It'd be a huge viral hit. It was so funny. I guess he's not recognizable. He's 18 now. He's not going to be recognized from when he's less than a year old. So it's not invading his privacy or anything. But I don't know, I lost it about 10 years ago or something. I've got a whole bunch of other videos that I shot at the same time, and some of those are quite funny. My particular favorite is my daughter is 2.5 years older than her brother. So she's 3 and a bit years old, and he's about 1 year old. Would I need his permission to upload it? No, God damn it. I'm his father. I own him. He has no rights. He wouldn't object to me uploading it. He's not recognizable. So I've got this video. What happened when they were playing? She accidentally hit him with something, and he actually got a black eye out of it. He didn't hit him that hard. It was just some accident. She ran into him, and he got a black eye out of it. She's very sorry. She loved her brother. So I've got a video, and he's got a black eye. And I go, buddy, you got a black eye. And I point the camera at her and go, how'd your brother get a black eye? She goes, it was an accident. I said, yeah, but how did it happen? She goes, it was an accident. I said, yeah, but how did it happen? She goes, it was an accident. She never said, I biffed him in the head. She just kept saying, it was an accident. That one I've been tempted to put up. I do find, but it needs context. I'd have to explain. They were playing, and she like ran into him, hit him in the face, and gave him a black eye. And she was quite upset by it. But we told her, well, it's an accident. You didn't do anything wrong. It was an accident. I've just got this video where I'm trying to get her to confess to bashing her brother. Okay, why did your baby brother have a black eye? She goes, it was an accident. Like, she should be a politician. She won't admit to anything. She's a little 3-year-old going, it was an accident. Just an accident. She's like, this is wild. I mean, my first computer, the computer I had these on, you had a 386, Miss Foxification. My first computer, Miss Foxification, was a 386 that the guy in the shop upgraded to a 486. Megalich, you had a SX. That sounds almost exactly like mine. 486 SX. I think you upgraded to. Was it which was a higher spec, SX or DX? Yeah, like a 33 megahertz processor. Yeah, mine. The base was 1 megabyte RAM, and I upgraded it to 4 megabyte RAM. Ah, that's no. I had that one. This Foxification, a DX4100. I had that. The DX was higher. Yeah, the base that I was buying was a 386, and he upgraded it to a DX4100, like 4 megabytes RAM. Yeah, it was only a couple hundred megabytes hard drive. I remember the hard drive was only big enough to have Windows and a couple of programs. Like, when I got new programs, I would have to delete one and move on. You see, Miss Foxification, I bought my computer because Pentiums had just come out. So SX and DX computers had just got marked way down. And by way down, I mean $2,000. I paid $2,000 for this computer. And for reference, for my $2,000 computer, a $500 computer that you bought today is approximately 100 times more powerful than my $2,000 computer was. Megalich, I never owned a Commodore 64, but I played on a Commodore 64. I played on a Tandy TRS-80. I played on an Apple II. I played on a whole bunch of early computers. Like the Tandy TRS-80 had a tape drive, like cassette. A cassette. You loaded programs from a cassette. I played on a TRS-80. I played on a Commodore 64. I played on an Amiga. Amigas were great for games in their day. Amigas were a really good gaming computer in the early years of computing. They had Apple IIs when I was in high school. I learned some very basic programming on an Apple II, the Apple version of BASIC. I don't think Apple called it BASIC, although maybe they did, but I learned some very basic programming. But the first computer I bought with my own money was an SX33, 33 megahertz processor that upgraded to a DX66 and eventually to a DX100. And then when Windows 95 came out, I got a Pentium. So yeah, my first one, it was Windows 3.1. The tech guy who set it up for me set up a DOS shell so I could run DOS programs with a kind of graphical interface for an idiot like me. When did I first get online? When did I personally get online? Some friends of mine were at uni, had access to the internet. But my own first personal internet account through an ISP, my first ISP was TPG, who still exists today. They were one of the first independent ISPs. TPG stood for Total Peripheral Group. They started selling computer peripherals, but they got into being an ISP. They were my first ISP. I think they still exist as an ISP. That would have been with my own account in about 93, 94. My first personal account to get on the internet would have been 93, 94. I'm sure it was earlier than 95. The reason I can peg it is because my daughter may well be the first internet baby in the world. And my definition for that is the first baby born to parents that lived in completely different places that only met because of the internet. I was living in Sydney and her mum was living in Melbourne, and we met in an internet chat room and ended up getting together and had a baby who was born in 97. And I'm not talking about nerds had babies before that. Nerds who were working together on the internet had babies before that. But I think there is a very strong chance my daughter is the first internet baby in the world. Like I said, that's with the definition that the parents were living in completely different places and met over the internet and would never have met without the internet. So that's a weird little thing. I try not to mention it too often to her because I think she finds it really weird. But yeah, I think my first personal internet account was in 93 or 94. I'm almost sure it was before 95. Definitely before Windows 95, I'm sure. This is when you had to have dial-up programs, and there were, oh, are you connecting through SLIP or PPP, or there were different protocols for connecting to the internet. And instead of connecting to the internet, you could connect to a bulletin board, which is when you were physically dialing into a mainframe somewhere. I know I'd spent a little bit of time on bulletin boards, but not much. So I think I had my first personal internet account with TPG actually, that's probably how I could find out when TPG first started offering internet. I'll do a really quick Google search. When did... Oh, I must have searched on that before and auto-completed. When did TPG start as an ISP? What does Wikipedia say about them? History. Total Peripherals Group was established in '86. Yeah, there doesn't seem to be any useful information here. It's talking about 2007. That's useless to me. No, it doesn't look like they've got any useful information. They started offering broadband in 2009. Yeah, but I'm talking about dial-up. That's not useful to me at all. What about the company website? Does that say anything? Probably not. Anyway, that would probably be the way to work out how long I'd been on the internet, to find out when TPG first started offering internet. Oh, how much was it a month? I don't even remember. Oh my God. Misfoxification, terrible flashback. What's my ICQ number? Yeah, I used ICQ for a while. So, yes, I do remember when you couldn't use the landline and the internet at the same time. I remember that very well. That was my world. I didn't get broadband till I started on YouTube. Like I started on YouTube just after I got broadband. So I've been on YouTube 13 years. So I got broadband in 2006. 2006. So I was on dial-up for a dozen years before that. Tuffy, you got your broadband in 2004. Yeah, broadband had been around for a couple of years before I got it. I ended up getting it when I got, what do you call it? When you could get broadband through your Foxtel cable. Yeah. See, Belinda, TPG, Total Peripheral Group, existed since the 80s. So they might have changed their name to TPG in '92. So I'm not sure when they started offering dial-up. Because, yeah, the TPG stands for Total Peripheral Groups. For years, they sold computer peripherals. That's what the business was. Yes. Well, look at that. It's after 10. I think it's time to say goodnight. My drink's gone. Mimsy's been sitting on my knee just off camera the last half hour. You got to say goodnight to everyone, Mimsy. No, come here. Say goodnight. Good night. Good night, everybody. Good night. Good night, everybody. Mimsy says good night. Let me go on the wrong thing. Go there. You sit there. Okay. So yes, good night, one and all. Thank you very much for your company. It has, as always, been great hanging out with you for a while. I hope you'll take care. We'll see if I get motivated to do a Wangafat Wednesday tomorrow. We should make a Mimsy movie. Mimsy is very popular, I acknowledge that. Good night to you, one and all. Look, take care of yourself, everyone. I hope to see you again soon. Until then, whenever that may be, I will say bye for now. Click the